It was the kind of night that whispered of storms long before the first thunderclap. Wilmington, North Carolina, usually slept quietly under the watch of crescent moons and the soft hum of cicadas. But on this humid July evening, the air felt heavy, thick with anticipation, though no one knew why. Families had tucked themselves behind locked doors. Sprinklers ticked faintly across manicured lawns, and the faint glow of porch lights offered a semblance of comfort. All of that would soon be shattered. Inside a two-story brick house at the end of the cul-de-sac, Judge Andre Colston stirred from a restless sleep. His eyes opened to a sharp scent that didn't belong. The unmistakable tang of smoke. His heart hammered. Disoriented, he swung his legs over the side of the bed, the floor cold against his bare feet, and swung open the bedroom door. That's when he saw it. Thick gray clouds rolling up the staircase, devouring the hallway with an almost sentient hunger. Sparks popped like gunfire along the walls, and the roar of flames began to fill the house with an unholy symphony of destruction. "Smoke!" he muttered, his voice raw as he covered his mouth with his shirt. Panic clutched him, but he forced himself forward. His briefcase was at the ready, tucked under his arm, a fragile barrier between him and total loss. The fire alarm shrieked, its high-pitched wail cutting through the roar of crackling timber. His legs carried him through the chaos, over scorched rugs, past photos of his late wife Janice and nephew Julian that glimmered eerily in the firelight. Outside, neighbors poured into the street, drawn by the flickering inferno. Linda Garvey, a retired teacher 2 doors down, grabbed her husband's arm and yelled his name, guiding him toward safety. The night was suddenly alive with sirens, red and blue lights slicing through smoke, and the unmistakable clamor of fire crews racing against time. Andre could only watch, frozen, as the home he had painstakingly built, filled with memories and love, was devoured in minutes. Every detail, the armchair where Janice had read bedtime stories, the hydrangeas she had planted along the fence, the stack of trial files meticulously organized on his desk, was being reduced to ash. His chest tightened with grief. The smell of charred wood clawed at his lungs. And yet, amid the chaos, a single truth burned brighter than the flames. This was no accident. Investigators would later confirm what Andre already feared. This was deliberate. Accelerant had been poured near the fence line. Surveillance footage from his property and 2 neighboring homes had captured a dark SUV circling the block just before the blaze. When officers traced it back to its owner, the shock reverberated through the cul-de-sac. Colleen Markham, the neighborhood HOA president, the same woman who obsessed over mailbox colors, porch lights, and hedge heights. The same woman whose complaints about trivial rules had once been dismissed as overzealous but now revealed a darkness that had been simmering beneath the surface. Andre could scarcely reconcile it. This was the woman he had seen at every HOA meeting, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp as a hawk, scolding neighbors over insignificant infractions. Her obsession had escalated quietly over months. Letters stacked on his counter, complaints about his yard, photos taken when his car wasn't perfectly aligned with the curb. At first, Andre had laughed it off, attributing her behavior to overzealous rule enforcement. But when those minor complaints turned into nighttime surveillance and muttered threats, he realized he was living under a shadow he couldn't escape. And yet, nothing could have prepared him for what came next. Within days of the fire, Colleen would be led into the courtroom where Andre presided. Shackled, orange jumpsuit, hands bound, and the instant their eyes met, a hush fell over the gallery. Victim and defendant, judge and arsonist. 2 lives colliding in a moment so charged it seemed impossible to breathe. For a heartbeat, the entire room froze in disbelief, every whispered conversation stilled by the weight of the encounter. But this wasn't just a story of fire. This was a story of obsession, escalation, and the dangerous path hatred carves when left unchecked. And what began as a petty dispute over porch lights and hedges had spiraled into something far darker, something capable of shattering not just property, but the very sense of safety a man had built around himself. Now, you might be wondering, How does a simple neighborly dispute twist so violently that one woman would take another's home and almost everything inside it? How does obsession grow so unchecked that a community, once peaceful, becomes the stage for destruction and fear? And most importantly, what happens when the victim of that obsession is the one sworn to uphold justice? To uncover the truth, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to the day Andre moved into this idyllic neighborhood, to the moment Colleen first noticed him, and to the first sparks of tension that would eventually ignite a blaze no one could have foreseen. Before the fire, before the courtroom, before the shocking confrontation that would leave a town questioning everything they thought they knew about safety, civility, and obsession. Andre Colston had always believed in balance, the delicate equilibrium between duty and peace, work and home, law and life. At 54, he had earned his reputation as a fair, steadfast judge in New Hanover County, handling cases with a calm authority that inspired trust in both colleagues and the public. Wilmington had seemed perfect, quiet enough for respite, lively enough for engagement, and close enough to the coast that weekends could be spent near the water. When Andre purchased his brick two-story home at the end of a cul-de-sac, he imagined family barbecues, late-night conversations on the porch, and evenings of calm reading in the worn armchair by the fireplace. The neighborhood welcomed him warmly. Neighbors waved as he moved in, and he returned the gestures with his easy smile. He kept his lawn trimmed and his hedges neat, a subtle but deliberate expression of order in a world already complicated by the pressures of the courtroom. Andre's philosophy was simple. Maintain your space, respect others, but do not let others dictate your sense of peace. But not everyone shared that philosophy. Colleen Markham appeared shortly after Andre settled in, clipboard in hand, lips pressed tight in that determined line of someone convinced they were always right. To the other residents, she was the vigilant HOA president, the one who kept order and enforced the bylaws with near religious zeal. But to Andre, she quickly became something far more ominous. Her first encounter with him occurred over something trivial, or so it seemed, a porch light left on slightly past the HOA's mandated time. "Judge Colston," she said sharply one evening as Andre watered his front garden. "Your porch light is too bright, and it stays on too late. It disrupts the neighborhood." Andre set down the hose, his expression neutral. "Evening, Miss Markham. For security purposes, it shuts off around midnight." Her eyes narrowed. "The bylaws state 11 p.m. You are in violation." Andre, used to mediating disputes in the courtroom, paused. There was something different in her tone, not the firm precision of someone enforcing the rules, but the edge of personal scrutiny, as though she had marked him from the moment he arrived. "I'll look into it," he said evenly. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Within a week, letters arrived, hedges above regulation, mailbox color inconsistent, minor yard violations meticulously documented and signed with her name. Andre laughed initially, joking to his friend Marcus Lee over the phone. If this is the biggest problem she can find, maybe this neighborhood is too perfect. Marcus chuckled, imagining her, clipboard in hand. "Man, she measures grass with a ruler, doesn't she?" Andre forced a smile, but the reality was unsettling. Each letter, each uninvited inspection, each glare from across the street began to weigh on him like the oppressive heat of the summer. The tension was almost tangible, the air thick with the unspoken pressure of someone watching every move. Neighbors began noticing. Linda Garvey, a retired teacher who lived 2 houses down, mentioned quietly, "She doesn't bother anyone like that, except you." Andre shrugged, hoping to dismiss it, but Linda shook her head, lowering her voice. "Unlucky doesn't send 3 letters in a month." Colleen's fixation deepened. If Andre parked slightly off the curb, she snapped photos. If friends visited, she timed their stay. Every new complaint felt like another brick in an invisible wall she was building, a silent siege around his life. While some neighbors rolled their eyes at her behavior, no one spoke openly during HOA meetings. She was too loud, too pushy, and many preferred avoidance over confrontation. Andre tried to maintain equilibrium, focusing on his work and family. He kept his evenings quiet, reading law books or spending time with his late wife's photographs. But Colleen's shadow seemed to grow heavier with every passing week. Even his younger sister Sharon noticed the signs. Visiting one evening, she glanced at the stack of letters on the kitchen counter. "All this from the HOA?" she asked, incredulous. Andre nodded, stirring the pot on the stove absent-mindedly. "Same handwriting, same signature." Sharon frowned. "You're a judge. You've handled dangerous cases, high-profile disputes. Are you sure this isn't more than just rules?" Andre paused, looking out the window toward the faint glow of Colleen's house across the street. "I've thought about it," he said slowly, "but I can't assume the worst. I'll keep calm. Keep doing my thing." Yet Colleen had no intention of keeping calm. Her petty grievances evolved into harassment, each letter and visit layering another weight on his sense of safety. Her mutterings grew darker, overheard by neighbors during HOA meetings. "He thinks he's above everyone else," she snapped once. But even Andre, hardened by years of courtroom battles, felt the sting. Home wasn't a courtroom, it was a sanctuary, and she was turning it into a battlefield. One spring morning, she escalated. Andre was clipping roses when Colleen appeared across the lawn, this time without a clipboard, just a phone in her hand, documenting yet another violation. "You know the rules about yard waste," she called, angling the phone like a camera, evidence gathering in real time. Andre straightened, pruning shears in hand. "Good morning, Miss Markham. I take care of my yard. Always have." She stepped closer, snapping another photo. "We'll see what the board says." Andre let the silence stretch, then shook his head slowly. "Do you really think this is how neighbors should treat each other?" Neighbors were starting to murmur, unsure whether to intervene, unsure how far she might go. Victor Daniels, Andre's longtime friend, happened to pull up with fishing gear that day. His grin cut through the tension immediately. "What's going on here?" he asked, glancing between the two. "That's my duty as president," Colleen replied, voice firm. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Duty? He's got the cleanest yard on this street." Colleen's face flushed. Without another word, she stormed back toward her house, heels clicking against the pavement like a metronome of threat. Andre sighed. "I've been watching, Victor. I just don't want to escalate it." But escalation was inevitable. Her surveillance, muttering, and increasingly bold complaints marked a turning point. The obsession that began with mailbox colors and hedges was transforming into something darker, something dangerous. Andre's attempts to maintain peace were failing. He began installing cameras, taking notes, documenting every interaction. Yet even with precautions, Colleen's shadow continued to creep closer. She lingered on sidewalks, timed visits, whispered threats, testing boundaries, testing him. And while the neighborhood tried to dismiss it as overzealous HOA behavior, Andre knew this was no ordinary dispute. Something in her eyes, in the way she measured every move, signaled a fixation far beyond normal boundaries. He could feel it pressing in, a storm growing silently beneath the surface of their quaint cul-de-sac. And this is just the beginning. What starts as obsession over minor rules would soon erupt into a confrontation so extreme it would engulf not just a home, but the very sense of safety and justice Andre had spent a lifetime building. Click the subscribe button now, because the next chapter reveals how petty disputes turned into dangerous obsession, and how a single act of hatred set the stage for a fire no one saw coming. Spring turned to early summer, and Colleen Markham's obsession with Andre Colston shifted from irritating letters to overt hostility. The neighborhood that once debated hedge heights and mailbox colors now whispered behind closed doors about her behavior. Some residents nervously glanced across the street, watching as Colleen loitered on the sidewalk, her phone clutched in her hand, eyes scanning Andre's property as though marking each movement. The atmosphere of the cul-de-sac thickened with tension, an invisible storm pressing down on everyone who lived there. Andre had tried to keep life normal. He maintained his routines: court sessions, mentoring young attorneys, Sunday church, visits with family. Yet no matter where he went, he felt the shadow of Colleen's gaze. Her presence was inescapable. Whether through surveillance footage he checked each evening or whispered accounts from neighbors who had observed her pacing at odd hours. Sometimes Andre caught glimpses of her standing still under the dim glow of streetlights, as if waiting for a mistake he might never make. Even his younger sister Sharon noticed the escalation. During one evening visit, she frowned at the stack of letters, photographs, and notes documenting Colleen's latest incursions. "This isn't just petty," she whispered, her voice low. "She's testing boundaries, Andre. You can't ignore it anymore." Andre leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I know. I don't want this to escalate. If I confront her legally, people will accuse me of using my position as a judge for personal vendettas. I want to keep the house a sanctuary, not another courtroom." Sharon's eyes softened. "And she's making that impossible. Dre, you can't just let her push and push until something breaks. You have to protect yourself." Andre nodded slowly, knowing she was right, yet hesitant to take actions that could inflame her further. He installed security cameras strategically around his property, trying to preserve both privacy and safety. But even these precautions revealed more than he wanted to see. Colleen lingered, snapping photos, pacing, taking note of the smallest details, anything she could weaponize as evidence against him. Neighbors began talking openly. Linda Garvey admitted to seeing Colleen on several late-night walks, muttering under her breath, "He doesn't belong here. Not here. Not ever." Pauline Rivers, another neighbor, recalled hearing similar phrases, whispered almost like a mantra. Each observation sent a chill through the street. The casual conversations about gardening and weekend barbecues had transformed into hushed warnings. Andre tried to stay grounded, reminding himself that this was still a minor nuisance compared to the criminal cases he presided over. But home was different. Home was meant to be safe. Courtrooms were designed for conflict. Houses were designed for refuge. And Colleen was turning his sanctuary into a stage for intimidation. Her attacks became more aggressive. She accused Andre of hosting unauthorized gatherings when friends or family visited. She filed complaints about the American flag he displayed, insisting it violated HOA guidelines. Even the faint sounds of his nephew practicing the saxophone became grounds for a noise complaint. Andre, patient as he was, realized her behavior was no longer about rules. It was about control, about exerting power over him personally. One evening, determined to address the harassment directly, Andre walked across the street to confront her. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. Colleen opened the door, her expression unreadable, as if expecting him. "Miss Markham," Andre began, his voice steady but firm, "this has gone far enough. Your constant complaints aren't about rules anymore. They're harassment. This is personal." Colleen tilted her head slightly, a smirk playing on her lips. "Personal? You think this is about you? I treat everyone the same." Andre leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Then why am I the only mailbox you check twice a week? Why is my house the focus of every complaint, every observation?" Her gaze flickered briefly, just enough for Andre to catch the hint of satisfaction in her eyes. "Because you don't belong here. Not the way you think you do." He clenched his jaw, stepping back. "Good night, Miss Markham." As he walked away, her voice followed him, echoing in the empty street. "You can wear your robe in court, Judge, but it won't protect you here." Those words lingered like smoke in his mind long after he returned home. Sharon urged him to document everything, letters, notes, any suspicious behavior. Andre complied, creating meticulous records of each interaction. Yet he still hoped to avoid a direct legal battle. He wanted his house to be a home, not another courtroom. Colleen, however, was escalating regardless. At the next HOA meeting, her hostility became public, cutting through the mundane chatter about snow removal and landscaping. When neighbors praised Andre for helping shovel driveways or fixing fences, Colleen's sharp retort silenced the room. "Good deeds don't excuse violations," she snapped. Her words weren't about rules, they were about asserting dominance, a reminder that she could twist the neighborhood's order into her personal battleground. Andre remained calm, listening silently. He knew any reaction from him could escalate her fury. Still, her behavior was no longer mere obsession. It had become a simmering threat. The letters, complaints, and muttered warnings were only the precursor. Something more dangerous was brewing. Victor Daniels, Andre's lifelong friend, noticed the change immediately. One evening, he leaned across the back porch railing, voice low but firm. "Dre, people like her don't just stop. They escalate. You need to be ready." Andre nodded, installing additional cameras and updating security measures, trying to regain a sense of control. But Colleen's tactics were unpredictable, her focus unrelenting. She tested boundaries at every opportunity, creeping closer to the line between harassment and criminal behavior. Neighbors could see it too. Conversations no longer revolved around trivial HOA disputes. Instead, whispers of fear and speculation filled the street. Everyone sensed that Colleen's obsession was growing dangerous, but no one anticipated the escalation that was about to occur. And this is where it turns dark. Obsession doesn't remain on paper or in whispered complaints. When control becomes an obsession, there is no limit to what one will do. In the next segment, you'll witness how Colleen's fixation explodes into a catastrophic act that shatters a home, a neighborhood, and lives forever. Click the subscribe button now, because the story is about to cross the line from harassment to danger, and you won't want to miss the next shocking chapter. By late July, Colleen Markham's obsession had reached a tipping point. The neighborhood, once filled with summer barbecues, children riding bikes, and casual greetings across driveways, had grown tense, a collective unease seeping into every conversation. Residents whispered about her pacing at odd hours, her sharp voice cutting through the quiet, her eyes fixed on Andre's house. But no one could have predicted the terror that was about to strike. It was a humid Thursday night, the kind where the air clings to your skin and the cicadas drone incessantly. Andre had spent the evening reviewing notes for a sentencing hearing scheduled for the following day. He meticulously stacked the papers on his desk, turned off the lamp, and made his way upstairs. The house was quiet. Sharon had left after dinner, leaving him to the calm he had desperately tried to preserve. He slipped into bed, exhausted but reassured that his security cameras would alert him to any unusual activity. At 2 a.m., a faint crackle sounded soft, almost imperceptible, like twigs breaking underfoot. Andre's eyes shot open. Disoriented, he sat up, taking in the dim glow of the room. Then came the sharp scent. Smoke. A thin, acrid haze seeped into the bedroom. Andre's pulse spiked. "Smoke," he muttered, voice hoarse. He swung his legs over the bed, but the hallway was already filled with gray, choking clouds. His security alarm blared, a shrill wail that reverberated through the house. He yanked the nightstand drawer open, grabbed his phone, and dialed 911, struggling to keep his voice steady. "There's a fire. Please send help. My address is..." The dispatcher's voice was calm but firm. "Get out of the house immediately, sir. Fire crews are on the way." Adrenaline surged through Andre as he dropped the phone, crouched low, and advanced toward the stairs. Sparks popped like gunfire along the walls. Heat radiated with each step, thickening the smoke, choking his lungs. He stumbled into the night, gasping for air, and found neighbors already spilling from their homes. Linda Garvey screamed his name, rushing forward with her husband to pull him toward safety. The street was alive with sirens, the red lights of fire engines painting the night in an ominous glow. Water collided with flames as firefighters leapt into action, barking orders, dragging hoses across scorched pavement. Andre, barefoot and trembling, could only watch as the house he had built with care, the sanctuary where his late wife Janice had planted hydrangeas, collapsed into glowing embers. Every photograph, every piece of furniture, every memory was being devoured by fire. All that he managed to salvage was his briefcase, clutched tightly to his chest. Victor Daniels arrived minutes later, breathless from racing across town. "Dre, are you okay?" he demanded, gripping Andre's shoulder. Andre's eyes never left the inferno. "She did this?" he whispered, voice tight with disbelief. Victor's jaw clenched. Who else could? Neighbors, some crying, some staring in stunned silence, watched as the fire consumed everything Andre had fought to protect. Investigators worked through the night. By dawn, the blaze was out, leaving only charred remains. Windows melted into warped shapes, the roof caved in, and the house was unrecognizable, a skeleton of blackened wood and ash. A fire marshal approached, clipboard in hand. "Preliminary signs point to arson," he said, pointing to traces of accelerant near the fence line. Andre nodded slowly. He had known the threat had escalated, but the reality was worse than he could have imagined. Within 2 days, detectives knocked on Colleen Markham's door. Surveillance from Andre's cameras, along with neighboring cameras, had captured her car circling the block just before the fire. A half-empty gas can discovered in her garage contained traces matching the accelerant used in the blaze. When she was led away in handcuffs, the neighborhood that had tolerated petty disputes and whispered observations now watched in shock. Colleen's posture was defiant. She lifted her chin as officers cuffed her wrists, staring straight ahead. Linda Garvey muttered under her breath, "She looks proud of herself." Victor growled softly, "She's dangerous, not just obsessed." Andre, standing across the street, felt a hollow ache deeper than the loss of bricks and timber. His home was gone, yes, but the sacred trust of a neighborhood, of what it meant to feel safe, had been burned away alongside it. Amid the charred rubble, he pulled out a scorched photograph of Janice and Julian at a summer picnic, edges blackened, faces smudged, and held it like gold. Weeks later, when Andre finally returned to his office, the reality of what had happened settled into every corner of his life. He knew that soon he would walk into the courtroom and face Colleen Markham, the very person who had tried to erase him, not just as a neighbor, but as the defendant. The tension, suspense, and stakes were about to escalate further. This was no longer a story about petty disputes. It was about obsession, power, and destruction. And it was about to test everything Andre believed about justice, fairness, and courage. Click the subscribe button now, because in the next segment, you'll witness the courtroom confrontation that would stun a community and reveal the true depth of one woman's hatred. The courthouse always carried a certain weight. Its marble floors echoed with footsteps of the desperate, the guilty, the innocent, and those still waiting to be judged. For Judge Andre Colston, those halls had long represented order, reason, and justice. But on the morning of Colleen Markham's arraignment, those same halls felt like a trap. Every step toward the courtroom tightened the knot in his chest. The press had gathered outside, cameras clicking, microphones thrust forward as reporters shouted questions. "Judge Colston, is it true your home was set on fire by a neighbor? Do you plan to recuse yourself? How do you feel facing the woman accused of destroying your house?" Andre ignored them, flanked by deputies as he made his way inside. His briefcase felt heavier than usual, though it carried only a fraction of what he'd lost. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. Spectators filled the gallery, whispering, their eyes darting between the judge's bench and the defense table where Colleen would soon sit. When the door opened and deputies escorted her in, the room stilled. Shackled at the wrists and ankles, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, Colleen Markham looked nothing like the meticulous, clipboard-wielding HOA president who had once lorded over mailbox heights and lawn lengths. Yet, her posture remained defiant. She held her head high, eyes scanning the room with cold precision, until they locked on Andre. It was as if time froze. Victim and judge, defendant and arsonist. Two lives intertwined by hatred and fire. The gallery went silent, the air so heavy it felt impossible to breathe. Andre's grip tightened on his gavel. For a fleeting second, he wasn't sure if he was looking at a neighbor or a predator. The bailiff's voice shattered the silence. "All rise." The proceedings began. The prosecutor laid out the charges. First-degree arson, attempted murder, destruction of property, and reckless endangerment. Each word was like a hammer strike, ringing in the stillness. Andre sat composed, face unreadable, though his heart pounded beneath his robe. He had recused himself from directly presiding over Colleen's case, but this was his courtroom, his sanctuary, and watching her stand at the defense table felt like an invasion. Colleen's attorney, a wiry man with a polished tone, argued for bail. He painted her as a misunderstood community leader who had suffered under strained neighborly relations. He claimed the evidence was circumstantial, that Colleen was being vilified because of her reputation as a strict enforcer of HOA rules. The prosecutor countered sharply, presenting surveillance footage of Colleen's SUV circling the block minutes before the fire, as well as the gas can recovered from her garage. This was no accident. This was a calculated act of vengeance. Colleen's eyes flickered toward Andre, narrowing ever so slightly, as if the entire performance was meant for him. Her lips curved into a faint smile, mocking, defiant, chilling. Andre shifted in his seat, the weight of her stare pressing down on him. In the gallery, whispers spread. Linda Garvey sat clutching her husband's hand, shaking her head in disbelief. Victor Daniels leaned forward, jaw tight, muttering under his breath, "She's not even sorry. Look at her." The judge overseeing the case denied bail. "The defendant poses a danger to the community," he declared, gavel striking sharply. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Colleen didn't flinch. She simply turned her head once more toward Andre, her eyes burning with a quiet intensity that sent a chill down his spine. As deputies led her away, shackles clinking against the polished floor, Andre exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His home was gone, his memories reduced to ash, and now the woman responsible was behind bars. But the sense of relief he expected never came. Instead, there was only unease, because Colleen Markham wasn't finished. Her arrest had silenced her for the moment, but rumors began to swirl. Neighbors whispered about allies she might have, about documents she had hidden, about threats she had made before the fire. In quiet conversations at coffee shops and barbecues, people wondered if she had acted alone, or if something larger, something darker was at play. And Andre couldn't shake the feeling that her stare in the courtroom had been a promise, that this story wasn't ending here, that the fire was just the beginning, because what happened next would reveal the shocking depths of her obsession, and drag Andre into a battle that reached far beyond property lines. A battle where safety, justice, and sanity itself would hang in the balance. Colleen Markham sat in the county jail like a queen stripped of her throne, but not her crown. The concrete walls and steel bars might have caged her body, but her will remained unbroken. In the weeks following her arrest, she became an enigma. Silent in hearings, cooperative with guards, yet always watching, calculating. Andre tried to move forward, but the fire's scars clung to him. He relocated to a small rental apartment, his mornings stripped of the familiar comforts he once cherished. Gone were the hydrangeas Janice had planted. Gone was the laughter of his son in the backyard. Gone was the sanctuary of a home built with love. Even at work, he carried the weight of the loss. His colleagues offering sympathy he politely acknowledged but never absorbed. Victor Daniels visited often, urging him to stay strong. "She's locked up, Dre. She can't touch you now." Andre wanted to believe that, but at night, when silence crept in, he saw her stare. The defiant smirk she gave him in court, and he felt the fire's heat all over again. Then whispers began to spread. Linda Garvey overheard two women in line at the grocery store claiming Colleen had been writing letters. Dozens of them, to whom nobody knew. Another neighbor swore he saw a man, unfamiliar to the community, leaving Colleen's house weeks before the fire with folders tucked under his arm. Rumors thickened that Colleen had files on everyone in the neighborhood, meticulously documented secrets, violations, debts, and disputes, and some feared those files hadn't burned with her arrest. The truth surfaced one rainy afternoon. A guard at the jail intercepted a letter Colleen had tried to send out, addressed to a cousin. Inside was no family update, but a chilling manifesto. It detailed her grievances against the neighborhood, her war against disorder, and most disturbing of all, her plans should she ever be silenced. She wrote of allies on the outside, of information hidden in places no one would think to look, of leverage she still held over the so-called Honorable Judge Colston. When the prosecutor showed Andre a copy of the letter, his stomach turned. "This isn't over," he muttered. The prosecutor nodded grimly. "She may be behind bars, but she's still reaching beyond them." Days later, Andre returned to the charred remains of his home. Investigators had combed it thoroughly, but something compelled him to walk the wreckage alone. The air still carried the faint scent of smoke, a smell that seemed woven into his very skin. As he picked through the debris, his foot struck something metallic. He crouched, pulling free a half-burned lockbox. Inside, warped papers revealed fragments of Colleen's handwriting, lists of names, addresses, notes about neighbors' habits. Paranoid records, yes, but meticulous. She had documented everything. When Andre left for work, when Sharon visited, when children played too loudly. It was surveillance masquerading as community leadership. Victor, who had accompanied him, whistled low. This woman wasn't just running an HOA. She was running an intelligence operation. Andre closed the box with a snap. And she thinks she still is. Back at the jail, Colleen's behavior grew more erratic. She requested meeting after meeting with her attorney, insisting on controlling her own defense strategy. In one hearing, she interrupted the prosecutor with a cold, mocking laugh that silenced the entire courtroom. "You think you've buried me?" she hissed. "I know things about this community you don't. Judge Colston knows it too." The gallery erupted with gasps. The judge ordered her removed from the room, but the damage was done. Her words rippled through the neighborhood, planting seeds of fear. What did she know? What secrets did she still hold? Andre, though stoic, felt the weight of those seeds. The idea that Colleen's obsession was more than just a fixation on him, that it was a campaign, a mission, gnawed at him. The fire had destroyed his house, yes, but her reach extended further. She wasn't just after his home. She wanted his peace, his reputation, maybe even his position on the bench. Late one evening, he sat across from Victor in the dim light of his apartment. "She's not finished," Andre said quietly. "She's setting the stage for something bigger." The fire was her opening act. Victor leaned forward. "Then the question is, what's the finale?" Because what Andre was about to discover would shake the entire neighborhood, and prove that, even from behind bars, Colleen Markham still had the power to burn lives to the ground. The storm hit on a Thursday night. Sheets of rain lashed the city, thunder rolling like cannon fire across the skyline. Andre Colston sat at his desk, files spread before him, but his eyes weren't on the words. They were on the shadows beyond his window. Every crash of thunder felt like an omen. For weeks, rumors about Colleen's hidden files had haunted the neighborhood. Neighbors whispered that she had enough dirt to ruin marriages, cost jobs, even topple reputations. Andre tried to push it aside, but when a plain manila envelope appeared under his apartment door, those whispers became a scream. No return address, no handwriting on the outside, just his name. Inside were photocopies, dozens of them, pages pulled from Colleen's meticulous records, notes on Sharon's comings and goings, Linda's private disputes with her husband, Victor's past business debts, and Andre's. His breath caught when he saw his own name scrawled at the top of a page. Colleen had logged every late-night walk, every visitor to his home, even the nights he and his wife argued. Judge Colston believes himself untouchable. One line read, "But everyone breaks. Fire cleanses. Fire exposes truth." Andre dropped the papers as though they burned. His chest tightened, not from the accusations. They were thin, petty observations, but from the realization of her obsession. She hadn't just hated him as a neighbor or as a man who challenged her HOA rulebook. She had studied him, consumed him. He wasn't her victim. He was her project. That night, he called the prosecutor. "She's still pulling strings from inside. Someone on the outside is helping her." The prosecutor sighed. "We've suspected as much. We've intercepted 3 letters this month, but clearly more are slipping through. She has allies, and if she's as meticulous as you say, she may have set this up long before her arrest." The following morning, Andre arrived at the courthouse to find chaos. Reporters swarmed the steps, neighbors clutched folders, shouting accusations and denials. Word had spread. Colleen's files, or at least copies of them, had leaked into the community. Secrets once buried were now public. Marriages teetered. Friendships fractured. Jobs were threatened. And in the eye of the storm sat Colleen Markham, transported from jail to a hearing, shackled but smiling. As Andre entered the courtroom, their eyes locked. Her expression was triumphant, predatory. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" he muttered under his breath as he passed her table. Her smile widened. "No, Judge Colston. This is what you made me." The hearing devolved into chaos as her attorney tried to argue her innocence. But no one in the room was listening to legal arguments anymore. The real trial was already underway, in the court of public opinion. Colleen had succeeded in igniting not just a house, but an entire community. And then came the twist. During cross-examination, the prosecutor produced a flash drive recovered from Colleen's old SUV. Inside were files not only on the neighbors, but on local officials, city planners, even court clerks. Names, dates, photographs. Some of the information was benign. Some was damning. And all of it pointed to a chilling truth. Colleen hadn't been acting alone. She was part of a network, a fringe group that cloaked themselves in the language of community purity, obsessed with control, with order, with exposing imperfections in those around them. Colleen had been their soldier. The fire was her mission. The gallery gasped as the evidence unfurled. Colleen sat silent, her smirk fading for the first time. But in her eyes, Andre saw something worse than fear. He saw resolve. As deputies led her out, she turned to him and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "You took my home from me. I'll never stop taking from yours." Andre stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The case would continue, the prosecutors would dig deeper, the network would be exposed. But Andre knew the truth. Colleen Markham wasn't finished. Whether from a cell or through her followers, her shadow would stretch across his life for years to come. Outside, the storm raged on. Rain hammered the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted into cameras. Neighbors screamed at one another over exposed secrets. And above it all lingered the echo of fire, the fire that had consumed his home, and the fire of a woman's obsession that refused to be extinguished. Andre Colston straightened his shoulders, walked into the storm, and whispered to himself, "This isn't the end. It's only the beginning." Because in the ashes of Colleen's obsession, something darker was still smoldering, waiting for its chance to ignite.